Have you ever had a dream so big, it honestly kind of scared you? If so, amazing. If not, well then let today's interview, inspire you to start. Donald Osborn, he was only 14 years old when his imagination took flight at the sight of his neighbor's airplane. That wild imagination, just a kid's dream, it would take flight in a very big, exciting, and sometimes thrilling way. Inside of today's monumental 400th episode, you're going to be witness to how that dusty Nebraska dream of just a child, how it took flight. From flying over fields to flying across the world, Donald Osborn is proof that a dream, even so big that it scares you, can indeed come true. You might consider today's episode a celebration for the podcast, the 400th episode. We're just over 5 years running, and whoo, baby, what a journey it's been. But honestly, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than just an interview, because today is a reminder that no matter how big your dreams are, no matter how big and scary they may be, my friend, if you have the dream, it's for a reason. And I believe it's a reason for you to make it come true. And the biggest thing, the most important thing that I want you to remember is it's never about where you start, but rather where you land. My friend, I'm your host, Kevin Lowe, and it is my honor, my pleasure to welcome you to our 400th episode of Grit, Grace, and Inspiration.
Yeah, I got grit, grace, and inspiration on my mind.
What's going on, and welcome back to Grit, Grace, and Inspiration. Today, I have the pleasure of being in the studio with none other than Don Osborn. Don, man, a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I sure appreciate it. I love the invite, and it's great talking to you again, Kevin.
Yeah, man. Well, Don, I'm excited to get to explore your story. Obviously, a big part of our story today is really going to be kind of following a lot of your book that you have that we're going to get to talk all about. Today, my hope is to kind of get to explore the book kind of firsthand from you. And obviously, I guess the most logical place for us to start today is to me ask, where did the love for flying, or maybe even before it turned into a love, the excitement, the enthusiasm about flying, where did that even start at in your life?
I think some of it is one of my first memories, and I remember watching an airplane go over. And so it probably was deep-seated, from a very early age. I grew up in a very small town in western Nebraska, Shadron, Nebraska. And the idea of getting out of there was a tremendous goal, because it's like anything, you don't realize what you have till you're gone. So I wanted to see the rest of the world. I wanted to see what was over the hill. And it seemed like flying airplanes was the way to do that. And the more I got to know about airplanes, it just became my passion. I suppose basically, first of all, I wanted to be a rock and roll star, but the talent thing kind of got in the way. So I could work to be a pilot. I'll never be a better guitar player or singer, no matter how hard I work. So
I hear you. I love it. Now, are you from Nebraska? Is that where you were born and raised?
Yes, I was born in Shadron, Nebraska. It's right on the Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska border.
Okay.
About 100 miles from anywhere.
Yeah. Now, that part of Nebraska, am I imagining right? I'm imagining a lot of just farmland.
Farmland. And one interesting thing about that part of Nebraska, it is a lot hilly, almost forest-like. Most people that just fly over or drive through the interstate, they don't see that part of Nebraska. But there's areas I could take you up there, and you would think you're in Colorado if you didn't know better. So,
oh wow, okay, amazing. So, in terms of flying goes, when did you really start exploring it? Because I think of flying as something that you really can't start doing until you're an adult, but it started for you earlier in your teenage years, correct?
Yeah. When you read the book, you'll find out there was a guy that had an airplane out at the edge of town, and I used to watch that thing fly in. Well, as soon as I see that thing, I would try to follow and see where he lands and so after a few attempts, I saw where he was landing. And I saw the hangar that he's pushing it into. I knew somehow I had to get in there and see that airplane, see it up close. Being at that age and not very mature, I didn't think just to knock on his door and say, "Hey, I'm interested in airplanes. Would you show me your airplane?" Which probably would have been the way to do it with hindsight. So I broke into his hangar basically. I snuck in off the side to a little hole that I pulled siding loose, and I would hang around in that hangar, just looking at the airplane, imagining what it must do, and wondering what all these things inside did. The love of the mechanics of it, the airplane, the idea of flying was just ingrained in me pretty deeply.
Yeah. Now, what kind of airplane was this? Or I mean, more importantly for us who don't know anything about airplane, like what did it look like as you as a kid looking at this airplane?
It was a small yellow high wing airplane, which was a tail dragger. But for me, looking at it as a kid, it was the biggest, most powerful, exciting machine I'd ever seen in my life. I'd been around tractors and old cars and that type of thing to that point, but the fact that this thing had wings and a propeller on it was just horribly exciting to me. I thought there's got to be a way somehow I can get this thing into the sky.
Absolutely. Now, would you ever get to the point where you actually would go as far as climbing up inside of it and sitting in the
Yeah,
plane?
I hate to admit it because I'm sure the statute limitations are over, but I figured out how to get the door open and climb into it. And I would it had a stick in the center of it, and I'd move that around, imagining, I wonder what this thing does. And it was a very simple airplane, but I'd look at these four gauges that were in there, and the throttle was off to the side. And I would just I wonder what all this stuff does.
Yeah, amazing. So I have to ask at some point, because every story has a climax, I'm going to imagine at some point you got caught.
I got caught, and the guy came walking in the hangar, and I was engrossed, and I was in the airplane, and I saw, well, I heard somebody coming in, and I felt the door, could see the door opening, so I was out of that airplane through my little trap door that I had built, and jumped on my buzz bike and pedaled away as fast as I could, and he kind of ran me down, and he said, "So you're that little SOB that's been breaking into my hangar." And I like to say that was the start of my career. Yeah,
Wow.
he turned out to be a very nice gentleman, and kind of took me under his wing, no pun intended, a little bit, and gave me my first 7 or 8 airplane lessons, and actually sold me. So
Wow. So you have this man who catches this little SOB who's been breaking in his barn,
yeah,
but he doesn't tell you to just get lost, but he then literally starts to teach you how to fly.
exactly right. And then I can remember it was $12 an hour, and that included him, the airplane, the fuel, everything. And back then, $12 was a lot of money to come up with. So if you look in my old logbook, you could see about every 7 to 10 days I had a flight lesson. And that, because of that, it took me about 7 to 10 days to come up with that $12.
Yeah.
And one funny little story is a common question that you get asked over and over and over in this business is, "What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you in flying?" And I like to say it was showing up for a flight lesson with Frank without $12.
If you showed up without your $12, did you get to fly or no fly?
The first couple times he let me slide, but after he made it clear, from now on, you come up with that money. So,
Wow. Now, how at that age, this time, how would you come up with that money? What would you do for work?
well, I had a job in my uncle's gas station, and I still remember that paid 50 cents an hour. And you would mow lawns, shovel snow, collect pop bottles, you name it. Back then pop bottles were 2 cents a piece, and the grocery store would pay you cash when you brought them in. Lots of odd jobs, kind of anything for a buck.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, I'm kind of curious about once you actually got to go up in this plane with Frank. I mean, it's one thing to have this idea of what it must be like, but when you actually went up that first time, do you remember, like, did it meet those expectations? Was it scary? Did it just get you even more hyped about it? I'm kind of curious how that went.
Actually, I still remember it was a surprise because in my mind, I had imagined that flying an airplane would be like muscles, erratic movements, like, flying that thing like I stole it, just, stop to stop, hardcore, just like there's a machine gun shooting out of it. And as it turns out, you get up there and he teaches me right off the bat, it's very light touch. You apply pressure to this thing. You don't turn it, you don't push it, you don't steer it like a car. And I can remember thinking, that's not anything like I imagined it would be. It's habits over 50 years. When I drive a car, a lot of people look over at me because you fly a jet with two fingers usually when you're in most cases. So when I'm driving the car, I'll have those two fingers on the steering wheel down resting on my knee and just force a habit.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely amazing. It's obviously a much more gentle type thing than you would expect.
Exactly. It's the idea when, as an instructor, I used to tell new students a lot. I said, fly this thing like your grandmother's in the back seat there, and she's terrified of flying. So you don't want to do anything that's going to scare her.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Now, talk to me a little bit about your experience flying. I mean, you were at this point, you were only 14, correct?
Yeah, I think I was very close to 15 when he actually let me fly it by myself, which again was illegal. You technically need to be 16, especially nowadays. You have to almost be in an approved school and meet lots of requirements. And back then, it was a little more lax, but it still had the 16-year rule. So
Yeah. How was that? I mean, one thing going from flying with somebody, but you then flying it by yourself after not that long, that has to be somewhat terrifying.
I don't know that. I don't know that terrifying's the word. You're so engrossed in what you're supposed to do and how you're going to do it. Your mind's pretty busy, even as a young kid. And I always like to think, and I tell students, is the second time you solo might be a little more scary than the first time because you kind of know what to expect. But again, as an instructor, most of my life, I can look at these students and see, some of them are nervous, some of them can't wait to get me out of the airplane. Others are halfway between. So I think it's a matter of preparation. You're ready to do this thing. You're ready to go.
Yeah. Now, I read one thing in the book that I would love to have you tell the story about was I don't think it was real long, maybe after you started flying solo, that you snuck a buddy on board.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad that I'm at the stage in my career now. The FAA really can't come after me. I got to add also, it's fun being interviewed by somebody who's actually read the book. A lot of times they're just ad libbing it. But yeah, the second time I ever soloed an airplane, nobody really told me not to do this. I had a feeling maybe it wasn't, and I put a friend of mine in that airplane. You flew from the back seat, and it was a tandem thing. So I put him in the back seat, and then for the first time, I flew from the front, just not knowing. So that was kind of a different feeling. But yeah, took him up in the airplane, took him for a little ride, and I was kind of messing around up there, just again out of sheer ignorance. It wasn't cockiness. It wasn't arrogant. It was just ignorant. I simply didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And again, to fly a passenger, you have to have a private license, be 17 years old, and have nowadays a private pilot can take up to 100 hours to actually get his license. The requirement is 40 hours.
Yeah. Now, what was kind of like the time error when at this point in your life? Like, what kind of year were we looking at back then?
Well, let's see. That would have been in the mid 70s. I graduated high school in 75. So yeah, this would have been 73,
Okay.
72,
Yeah.
73.
Yeah. I mean, I guess because I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, the things we could get away with out in the middle of nowhere back in the 70s that just probably wouldn't happen today.
Yeah, I think about that a lot and all kinds of stuff. I mean, nowadays parents are so close, hovering over their kids. When we were kids, we'd head out into the woods, and my mom knew that I'd be back by dinner time, or at least right before it's dark. And we would put our 22 rifles on our buzz bikes, go down to the local Western Auto, buy a box of shells, 22 shells, and the guy would hand them to us and say, "Going out to shoot rats at the dump?" Yep, that's where we're going. And we'd ride our bikes right down Main Street with the 22s, strapped to the back, and nobody even so much as looked up.
That is just
So
awesome.
imagine that today. I mean, there would be SWAT teams.
There would.
Yeah,
Yeah, sadly enough. Yes.
exactly. That's exactly right. Sadly enough.
Now, speaking of family, did your parents, siblings, did they know about this whole flying endeavor that you were doing?
I was raised by a single parent. My mom raised four of us, and we were pretty much a poverty type situation. So, we never went hungry thanks to my mom. Would work several jobs, but we didn't have much extra money at all. And so I didn't really want my mom to know that I was, she asked several times, "What do you do with all that money you're making?" Because she knew I was working hard and I'd just say, "I'm saving it. I'm saving it up." So she found out, obviously, probably after I had my private license that I was flying, and she was pretty much a homebody, would have been a perfect farm lady, and didn't really have much interest in anything like that. So her idea was work. What was important to her is how much work you were doing right now today. How much work you did yesterday or what you might do tomorrow didn't matter to us. How hard are you working right now? Gardening, shoveling, building, that was all acceptable pastimes in her mind.
Yeah. So I guess would you say that you get your worth ethic from your mom?
Definitely, yeah. That was her life. My mom worked, and she solved most of her issues by working harder than she did the day before. So,
Mm. Wow, that's amazing. So to flying, I mean, you're a teenage boy. Did you think that this would ever turn into a career path?
I never really wanted to do anything else, and
Mm.
so I didn't know how it was going to happen, and I didn't really have any guidance. But yeah, I always imagined I'd be in a big airplane flying across the ocean someday, and that came to happen. So
Wow. No, so I guess I would love to hear, what is the story? How do you go from this teenage boy flying the neighbor's plane to actually becoming a commercial pilot?
back then, a lot of it was luck. A lot of it was on your own. You have to get licenses. I was lucky enough to get my flight instructor's license right before I started college. So through college, I was able to flight instruct quite a bit, build some hours, and actually fly some charter. And so by the time I was out of college, I had enough hours that a flight school in Phoenix looked at me seriously enough to hire me. So, and then from there, it was very turbulent times in the airlines. Airlines were going out of business, corporations were going out of business. So, a lot of my career was just trying to keep a job. Now, contrast that today, I mean, there's a huge pilot shortage, and somebody wanting to be a pilot today, there are thousands of programs and universities, airlines willing to take them in as a student or a possible, just they're willing to invest in people nowadays to get them into that cockpit and make a pilot out of them, which is wonderful for all those people. I sometimes have some envy or jealousy. I wish something like that was back when I was a kid, but Purdue University was the only college in the United States that had an aviation program, and it was incredibly expensive. So as compared to today, I don't know that you could walk into a community college anywhere and not see some type of an aviation program available.
Yeah. Wow. Now, during that time, what was going on in the world that made the airline industry like it's so difficult?
Well, it was the 80s, so I guess the oil business would be a good example. They strike oil somewhere, everybody's multi-millionaires overnight, and that's the next thing they're out buying jets, and 2 days later it all collapses, and after a few days these executives, they would think, hey, I know, we could sell those airplanes. That'll make us some money. Of course, a few days after they sell the airplanes, they think, oh, now we can fire the pilots. But, airlines were going through deregulations, things were changing, and it was just some airlines were trying to get, add more things, and they'd forget they were in the airline business. They would be rent-a-cars and hotels and touring packages, and then the airline part of it would kind of,
Yeah.
go by the wayside. And then I guess the nicest way to say with airlines and even corporations is mismanagement. Most people up there in the top floor, they don't have a clue what an airplane is, how much it costs, how to operate it, and they buy it. Even airlines, sometimes they'll buy 100 airplanes without a whole lot of research. Oh, this company gave us the best deal, let's buy their airplanes. We're at a stage now where technology has kind of solved that for a lot of people. They can do computer setups, they can do, what kind of task are you going to do with this airplane? What's your mission statement? And so, plus, it's become a lot more common. I mean, when I first started flying, people showed up to the airport wearing their best Sunday clothes and very respectful, very happy that the idea they were going to get on an airplane. Sometimes they'd walk out of the door, cross the ramp, right on into the airplane, no security or as compared to what we see today. So it's changed. It's changed an awful lot. 9/11 had a lot to do with how people perceive flying and how they actually can get from their car to an airplane.
Yeah, very fascinating. Now, were you still a commercial pilot? You mentioned 9/11 during that time?
Yes, I was. On that day, I was in Omaha getting ready to commute to work. And that month, I was doing Boston, Chicago, and our gate was next door to the American gate that took the terrorists out. So
Wow.
that's, there's a lot. Aviation's a very small community. I personally don't know anybody that was, died in 9/11, but I know a lot of people who know a lot of people. So it's just a very small community. So it's funny when you hear the rumors, it's like, well, I know that's not true because I would know about it. It's too small a community to hide something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm kind of curious through your career. I mean, what are the different maybe airlines you worked with, airplanes that you've flown? I mean, because obviously you have an extensive career, and I would love to kind of hear what all your career involved.
In a way, that's an easy answer, and maybe it's a hard answer too. If you want to do some research and find out what 25 airlines went out of business during the 80s and early 90s, there's a good chance I flew for a lot of them. I flew for a lot of airlines that went out of business. Corporations, when an airline goes out of business, you try to find a corporate job. So, the same thing, the corporations come and go with their aviation departments. It was very unstable as compared to what it is today. I started out flying for Braniff, and you have to be fairly old to even remember Braniff. But at the time I went to work for Braniff, it was like winning the lottery. I mean, it was one of the best airlines you could work for, the highest paid. I remember the chief pilot came in and said something effect to the first day, "Congratulations, you're all millionaires." And 7 months later, I'm on the street looking for another job. So,
Wow. Wow.
so I tell people I did not have a stellar career, but I had one of the most interesting careers of anybody I know about.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about some of the highlights of your career.
I talk about it in the book of what it felt like to be in full uniform, walking through that terminal, down the jetway, and into my seat in the airline. It's like I'd worked my entire life to get there, and here I am in a brand new airline uniform, walking down the jetway to get into that co-pilot seat. That was definitely a highlight. I guess, and go all the way then to highlight now is I'm getting very close to retiring. I fly a private jet for a guy now. It's just his personal jet, and I fly it for him. And I'm getting to the point where, I'm going to have a lot of spare time. I'm going to have time to spend with my grandkids and pursue other hobbies, do other things. And so, in a way, that's a highlight that I made it through this maze, and here I am.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you've spoken a lot about kind of the ups and downs of the airline industry as far as when you're working, when you're not, picking up other odd jobs and such. And there was one little story in your book that I would love for you to share because I thought it was absolutely hysterical.
All right.
Was when one of your tree trimming customers recognized you at the airport.
Yeah, that I had a tree business for many years, and it was to supplement the airline world because when an airline goes out of business, you just see the panic in people's eyes. And I thought, I need to find something that when I am thrown out on the street, I have something to do that next morning. Because in fact, that's some advice I give people now. I tell them, when you find yourself unemployed, go out and get another job, and then worry about your career. Don't just, sit around and mope. And really, in life, general, anything that happens, go out and find something to make you feel decent about yourself. But so I had a tree business. I worked in the tree world in high school and college with a good friend of mine out in Chadner, Nebraska. So I had a general idea of what the business was like. It took off pretty well. So I had a good customer, and he about a 3-week job. And so I'd work for a few days and go out and do my flying, come back, work. And just an employee customer type relationship, I'd talk to him a little bit. And we just got to where we kind of knew each other, and we'd talk a few minutes before the job or after the job. Well, one day I'm in full uniform getting ready to fly in Chicago, and I look and I could see this guy staring at me, and I realized who he was right off the bat. So he finally came up and said, "Excuse me, Captain, do I know you?" I said, "Yes, you do. I'm your tree man." I still remember his words. He said, "By God, you are, aren't you?" and, and so, of course, he says, "What? Explain this. Why are you here dressed that way?" And I told him that I said, "Well, to keep the tree business going, I have to find odd jobs to do in the meantime."
I supplement the tree business with being an airline
exactly,
pilot.
Right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that is hysterical.
And then I finished up his work and everything, and it's funny. He treated me like he treated me much higher up the chain than he would have just known I was a tree man. So.
Wow, that yeah, I thought that was a hysterical story in the book. And I guess that's where kind of segueing in, we keep talking about the book. So let's actually talk about the book. How did the book even come about? And I guess in with that question is, what made you decide that you wanted to write this book?
I have always considered myself a writer, whether it was lyrics or books and so it's always been kind of a side hobby. And so I started out, I was writing a expose on the airline industry. And I was fairly deep into the book. And I called my sister. And I said, I'm going to need help with this book I'm writing. Would you help me? And of course, she was busy with her life and her kids. And she was homeschooling and being a wife and mother and just as busy as she could be. And she almost thought, "Oh my God, do you realize how busy I am?" I said, "Yeah, but what do you think about doing this?" So she said, "Well, send me what you have." And so I sent her the first few chapters, and she read it and came back and said, "I don't think people are interested in hearing about this." And and I said, and I attribute it to sausage. People love sausage, but they don't necessarily want to hear about how it's made.
True.
So what she did say, she said, "I see a very interesting memoir here, not an expose." I said, "Well, let me go back and think about that." And so I kind of changed. I left some of the stories in there, but I kind of changed it more toward me than the airline world. And so we got about probably 30,000 words maybe. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is going to be good. And she said, "No, it's got to be almost twice this size. There's got to be a whole lot more if we're really going to make this thing go." And I remember telling her, "God, I don't even like me well enough to come up with that much more." And I would write something, and what her talent is, she's incredibly talented making, one word flow into the next word, one sentence flow into the next sentence, the paragraphs flow. And so I would send her my version of the stories, and she would just make it very easy to read and just enjoyable to read. And sometimes she'd call up and say, "Now, is this a typo or is this an airplane thing? I don't know what you're saying here." And we, we, we've had a lot of fun doing that. And so, as it turns out, it wasn't a matter of writing enough when it came ready to publish or to have the final rewrite. We had to take out a lot. And it was, the hard part wasn't how we're going to get enough. The really difficult part was what are we going to take out of this book? And
Mm.
in fact, a good friend of mine who also ended up being an airline pilot, and I lived with him in college. I had a whole 3-4 paragraphs about him, and and somebody, one of the editor type people said, "We're going to take him out of here. He's just not interesting enough." so, so when I saw him and talked to him about it, I had to tell him the story. The reason you're not in is because the editors thought you were boring. In true form, he said, "Yeah, I guess I am boring."
Oh,
But
wow.
in a way, it became just a tremendous, enjoyable, satisfying thing to do is write this. And we have a brand new project. I hope it's released early spring, and it's a series of short stories. And a lot of it's stuff that didn't fit into this book. And a lot of the real funny things, I think, is that maybe weren't quite acceptable for this book. It is going to be in the next one.
Yeah, I love it. Now, the name of the memoir, remind us of the name.
It's Where We Land. It's a pilot's reflection at altitude.
Hmm. Where did you guys come up with that title, Where We Land?
Well, nobody liked flying sausage, so I had a lot of comments on that. And myself, Annie, my sister, and my niece, who actually helped edit it, all the three of us bounced name after name around, and nothing seemed to just sound right, And then I can't remember; it was probably a combination of all three of us. But somebody said, it's the book talks about it's not really where you take off from; it's where you land. That's the whole general idea of this book is you don't have to start at a certain place, but you do have to. What's important is where you land, and then it popped in. That's the name of the book, Where We Land.
Yeah. Now, do you already have an idea for the title of the second book that you talked about?
We do, and it's already been kind of released a little bit. It's going to be called The Ding Dong Alder Boy.
Okay. Very different.
Yeah, it's in a way it's similar because it's about a bunch of rowdy kids growing up in western Nebraska and kind of the path some of us taken, and it comes into some modern stuff that happens just recently. And a lot of this book was fun for me because I recorded a lot of it, and then Annie would type it before I wrote most of it. And for some reason, we just got into this thing where I would tell her the story and then she would write it down. Then she'd send it back to me and I'd read it and actually laugh. We got some here because you're making me laugh with my story. So that's when we really felt that we had something going. Just a couple days ago, we were approached by some people about doing a children's book on Where We Land.
Oh,
It'll be
wow.
And so we don't know how far where that's going to go, but I think that sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I can tell anybody intrigued about the book that even just the first few chapters of the book, it almost has almost like that Field of Dreams type feel to it.
Yeah, okay, I like that. I haven't heard that exact description, but I like it. Good job.
It is. I mean, it literally, the movie, you have Kevin Costner, sees the field and sees
Right.
it was that first little plane with Frank.
Yep.
And that was your own Field of Dreams. I thought it's such a captivating read. It's an easy read and it's truly entertaining. As I actually told your sister in an email, I said, I literally felt like a little kid staring at the TV screen, like it's his chin on his hand, just 2 inches away from the TV, so enthralled in the show. I'm like, that's how I felt while reading.
Man,
it was that
what
good.
a great day. You're making me feel great. I really appreciate that because it's wonderful to get the feedback.
Of course, of course. No, I think it's amazing. Now, where is the best place for us to send somebody who would love to read the book?
The book's available on Amazon, and I found out just the other day I'm Amazonable, meaning you can type in Donald Osborn and the book comes up. But if you type up Where We Land in Amazon, it comes up, and it's available in Barnes and Noble, and it's about any bookstore you can go in and they can order it for you.
Okay. That's amazing. Well, Don, I guess my last question I would love to kind of ask you today is tied directly back to the book and the person listening today is what is the thing that you really hope that somebody who reads this book, what do you hope that they take away from it?
I really like that question. If you're a pilot, I hope you laugh and enjoy it. If you're somebody thinking about becoming a pilot, I hope that it's required reading someday. And then, and if you're somebody that rides on an airline now and then, and you kind of wonder what's going on behind that locked door or even underneath the terminal, I think this book will, especially nowadays where there's so much anxiety about flying and the media push on this might relax you a little bit and let you maybe enjoy the flight a little bit more. But the final and most thing important to me about if somebody reads this book, and it makes them laugh and cry. I've had that comment before, and that was really made me happy that as an author, I can invoke emotions that can make somebody laugh and cry. But with all that being said, I would hope that somebody would read this book and think, God, if somebody like that can do it, I certainly can too.
Yes. I love it, man. Well, Don, man, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to meet you, to get to hear your story. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to share a little piece of your story with me and my listeners. It means the world to me, so thank you.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the invite, and I hope to continue this. I'd like to meet you in person someday.
Absolutely. We will be sure that happens. And for you listening today, oh man, I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation as much as I have. Hopefully you're geared up. You're ready to go out and check out today's show notes, where I will leave a link to Don's book, where you can stay in touch with him, especially on that future book release. And highly encourage you to go read the book yourself. It is truly one of a kind. And I'm telling you, if you enjoyed today's interview, well, then the book is just going to take it to the next level. So with that, my friend, I encourage you to get out there and enjoy the day. Go pick up a copy of Don's book. And hey, most of all, just get out there and enjoy the day. I'm your host, Kevin Lowe, and this is Grit, Grace, and Inspiration.